Moses. Okay, so that is my Pharaoh cosplay. Hi, kids. Do you like violence? It's your boy. It's your man's failed Pharaoh, failed artist, failed homeless guy here. Um, yeah, so that is from my most recent semi viral hit on TikTok. Got about 2,000 views in an hour, about a 10-second video of me doing that, looking stupid. And it went pretty viral, pretty quick, or semi-viral, I guess you would say, with no description or hashtags, which I guess is the way I'm gonna have to fucking do videos from now on. Anyways, thought I might record a story time today. Today's topic is basically about the cumulative mental damages from several years dealing with homelessness off and on, and some of the shit you see. So I'm going to go ahead and prerequisite the rest of the video by saying this is a warning, a disclaimer. If things like sensitive topics like violence against animals and stuff like that affects you, please do not watch the rest of this video. Please turn it off now. And this is a very graphic story potentially for some of you to hear. And it's something that I feel like I need to talk about because it goes to show basically what can happen to the mind over time. Some of the things you encounter when being in a compromised situation, and just the horrible things that can come along that add damages over time amongst everything else that had happened in my life up to this point. This was kind of one of the cherries on the cake. So, of madness and things I've had to deal with in the subsequent years, mental hurdles I've had to overcome as far as that goes, and some of the things that may have contributed to my, repetitive homelessness or just losing hope or just whatever. But recently, me and my cousin were talking about it, and I thought I might, shoot a video about it. Since I hadn't posted a video in a long time, I thought I might go ahead and do this video and post it and see what you guys think. So with that being said, let's get into it. So really, we were discussing things about where my homeless journey began, and really it began years ago when, living with my father, who was an amputee, disabled, and I was the only one working, and had a friend of mine in the house. My mother and father had gotten mortgages, and basically, through the company at this time, and I guess this was part of the housing crisis, the company, without warning, raised our mortgage payments by $600, $700 something a month to right at almost $1,000 a month out of nowhere. So right after my mom died, this happened. About 2 months after my mom died, the mortgage company raised our rent out of control. And I basically was, me and my father, who was disabled at the time, he went to go stay with my grandmother basically, and we lost the home because we just could not come up with the means to pay this rent. He was on disability. He was able to work part-time, but he had really dropped off over the last couple months of doing that, leaving, and my friend wasn't working at the time, and I was the only one with a stable job. And, between my dad's disability and my income, we were able to pay that $700 and still afford groceries and whatnot and stuff like that, but it was still kind of tight. And I was working for Walmart at the time, only making $9-something an hour. And this happened roughly, over 10 years ago, at least. And, when we lost the place, I ended up moving in with a friend of mine and his mom to keep the job. We lived in Belmont, and we ended up moving into, from their duplex to a nice little white house, a home there in Belmont. We ended up living there for a bit, and then out of nowhere, about, I guess, 6 months after we had moved in together, and I was still working the job at Walmart, we ended up, taking this ill-advised move to Greenville to be closer to my friend's mother's parents. So I was like, all right, and we had no jobs, lined up or anything like that. But from what I heard before we went down there, that everybody was hiring and etc. So I wasn't too worried about leaving my job and going down there. Didn't have a lot of time to prepare. We just kind of, you know, kind of winged it. And I'm like, okay, well, we have my friend, his mom, me, and then my friend at the time's girlfriend, which was this, you know, unfortunate young lady who had been through a lot in her own life, and she, you know, was going through her own mental issues at the time. Um, we decided to move down to Greenville together and go be close to her parents. So we get down there, turned into a complete shit show. We ended up basically losing everything and scrambling to figure out a solution. Now, her parents wouldn't take us in at the time. They couldn't take us in. They didn't have room on their property. So we ended up basically going homeless. All of us ended up going homeless together. We, you know, we couldn't find really jobs that were working out. I had some bad circumstances. He wasn't really finding work, and you know, we basically just fucking failed, flat out failed in Greenville. So one of his friends that he knew from his socializing and shit like that was this guy who was basically muscle bound, hot rod kind of asshole, kind of douchebag Italian sort of fucking dude. And we end up going to his, basically out of a move of desperation, we end up going to his fucking trailer, and me and my friend end up setting up shop in his garage, you know, with mattresses and stuff. And then, you know, his mother ends up sleeping in one of his spare rooms in this tiny, you know, pretty big double wide mobile trailer, whatever. And we get there, man, and the property is just fucking full of trash. There's fucking trash bags everywhere. It's just, you know, and it's kind of, to give you an idea, this is like a more or less a party house. So for a lot of people to come there, fuck off, party, and just basically, you know, in the defense of the guy who owned the place, a lot of people would come there to fuck around, but none of them would really stay to clean up or really take care of the trash or do whatever. And he allowed this to happen. So, anyways, we get there. We're staying in the garage. We set up, we kind of split this garage into two little areas of the corners where we had mattresses that we were sleeping on. I had a mattress personally that was on these fucking, you know, sofas that, you know, I set it on top of the sofas we had, and set it on top of there and was basically sleeping on that at night. And he had a full size bed or whatever set up in the other side, and we used the shift rows and other furniture to kind of make a dividing line between this back area of the garage. And it was a huge garage. So, you know, we split this up, and then, you know, when we commenced living there, before I could find work or anything like that, I decided to clean up his entire property, you know, handle shit inside the house, just to basically smooth things over with this dude for helping us out and to give some kind of, you know, value to us being there, you know, because it was shit that needed to be done. And I figured when I got there, I'd do it, get it done, and it would take my mind off of what was happening, the madness that my life was becoming at this point. Because my friend, you know, despite what was going on down there, he wasn't really interested in finding a job, apparently, or whatever, or getting his shit together. And even through this situation where we were staying with this guy, it seemed like I was the only one trying to find work and trying to move forward and stuff like that. His mom couldn't work anymore, and she was trying to go into basically disability and trying to get that sorted out and whatever. So we were in a mess. And where we moved to is a place called Love Valley Road, which is in Kings Mountain. It's, you know, basically way the fuck out in the country. And if, you know, when we got out there, it was like basically we're so far removed from civilization to where it's going to be next to impossible to find work. Okay. He had an internet connection, so I could apply from jobs through there. And the closest place I could go was like 15, 20 miles away in Gastonia. Ended up finding a job at a Walgreens there, which I would keep for the next 5-6 years of my life, basically. But anyways, going back to this. So this gentleman had many female lovers in his time, some of them very unfortunate, you know, with various drug addictions and bad histories and whatever. The kind of women you would think a hot rod driving, short Italian sociopath would find in his life. Um, and you know, uh, one of those girls apparently had a dog that left the dog with him, and the dog's name was Brownie. It was this beautiful little brown dog, about a medium-sized brown dog, and they called her Brownie because she was all brown. She was sweet as she could be, sweetest little dog. Now, how long this dog was there and how long ago she left, I never really established, but apparently this dog had been there for a little bit. Um, but not long enough to get pregnant, I guess, because she wasn't fixed. Okay. And this is one of the things that he just kind of let go on around his world that he didn't really address or take care of or whatever. Which is, it is what it is. Okay. Um, and anyways, we're sitting there on this property. And another thing about this property is this is a place where people went to go party, and not only party, but in the back there was this huge fire pit that he would burn the trash in. And that would be a place where they'd shoot off guns and shit and just, generally act like, whatever. It was a place where everybody went to go lose their goddamn minds. And since it was so far out in the country, it really wasn't a big deal, and it was a trailer park out in this country. And, what you really learned about that place was it took a special kind of person to move out to this place. These were people who didn't want to be near civilization or be part of society necessarily. Some of them, they were just wanting to find a place so far removed that they can kind of skirt laws or do whatever, But anyways, it was kind of an isolated island of, madness, drug addiction, whatever the hell was going on in the neighborhood. But it was, for the most part, quiet. And you really never saw cops out there or anything like that. So anyways, we're in this place and we're living in the garage, and Brownie, the little, the dog, ends up getting pregnant. Okay. So she ends up getting pregnant, and it's not our dog. It's not really my place to say what happens to the dog, whatever. My friend and his girlfriend, the girl was like all excited about it, but I'm like, what's going to happen when the dog gives birth, basically. And, he wasn't too concerned about handling it or doing anything about it. So we just assumed it was, going to be a situation where she's eventually going to have the puppies. And what are we going to do with the puppies? Now, bearing in mind that the true nature of this person was not really known to many people, because I remember meeting him before we ended up in this situation predicament. He came down to the home in Belmont when he was starting a friendship with my friend. And, I met him a couple times. He seemed like a really nice guy. And to be honest with you, for the most part, he seemed like a really nice dude, like a real solid guy. Because there was some mechanical problems with my friend's car at the time when we were living in Belmont. And he came down to take a look at it or fix it or whatever when he got off of work one day or something like that. And I met him in passing. He seemed like a very good, decent guy. And I mean, also he was helping my friend out with doing the mechanical shit. So, I figured the dude was all right. Never really being involved in the, admittedly fucked up crowd of people that my friend was involved with. Up there at a place where a lot of people hung out on Franklin Boulevard and got into trouble and whatnot was like this whole area of Franklin Square, the Walmart's there, this place called Books A Million, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of kids, teenagers, yuppies, all these people, kind of merged in that area. There's also a bar up there called Gators or something like that. And my friend ended up building a social life by getting into these fucking places while I was working and paying the bills in Belmont. He was out there building a social life with these fucking, people. And, some of the worst people you could have ever met or been involved with. My ex-girlfriend, who I shared an apartment with for 5 years and dated for about a year, and then that shit ended up happening, and she was just a fucking sociopath, had mental disorders of her own, whatever, came from that group. But anyways, we're in that situation with him in his garage. So he drove a Camaro, very loud, hot rod kind of thing. And every morning when he would wake up to go to work, he would park that shit in the garage, and he would crank it up and then leave for work, and we would be sleeping in the garage. And it just was what it was. So every morning I'd get woke up to the sound of a goddamn car being cranked up. So, Brownie, the dog, ends up having her, puppies eventually. They're more or less bedded down and in the, garage is where they sleep, basically. In this little area we kind of made for them. It's not secure or anything, but it's kind of a place until we can get in touch with animal services to take the puppies or whatever. And once again, he's not really betraying or portraying any inclination of, minding the puppies or minding the dogs or whatever. I mean, and it is kind of what it is. It's his dog, it's his puppies, whatever. And I'm kind of just waiting on clarification as to what exactly the game plan is for these puppies, to try to find them a home or whatever. So she's nursing the pups. She has about 4 puppies, beautiful little dogs, of course. And, it just, I'm just going to get right to the thick of the point of this. And let me just go ahead and prerequisite this by saying this is where the graphic part is. Okay. So once again, you've been warned. And this is one of the things that shaped me and my mental state going forward, because that place was horrible, that situation was horrible, but this was the thing that more or less I could distinctly point to and say, this is one of the many events in my life that drove me over an edge and killed parts of me that I never imagined could be fucking killed, and also inspired hatred in me and disgust in me and almost a murderous level of intent because of this situation that just happens. It's life. It just happens. So basically we're in the garage. The puppies have basically bedded down. And one morning he decides to, they've started to crawl and kind of move along the garage floor. So one day he gets up, he goes to crank up his, car to leave for work. Or he goes to, it was a weekend actually, he wasn't going to work, so he cranked it up during the day, and it was, early in the day. He cranks it up, and one of the puppies had wandered over to the back wheel or the front wheel of his car. So before checking or before doing anything, he just cranks up his car and backs it up real fast. Now, whether he knew the dogs were there, whatever, I don't know. Whether he wanted to prove some point because he was sick in his head, I don't know. It is what it is. Or he knew that we liked the puppies. He was the kind of person where he knew that we formed an attachment to the dogs. So then he could fucking use that to shit on us, I guess. That was his plan. That's, in his infinite wisdom and superiority to everybody who was ever around him, of course, that was his plan. Now, I'm a kind of person, I love fucking animals. Okay, I really do. I love animals more than people most of the time. I've always had a connection with animals, and especially dogs. I just love dogs to death, And out of this horrible, shitty, god-awful situation we were thrust into that we were trying desperately to find a way out of, these dogs were like literally a little ray of hope. They were something that was mentally helping extremely. And I've grown really attached to the dog and seeing this and stuff like that, and it was kind of an uplifting thing, So he gets up, he decides to take the fuck off in his car, not even check around it, whatever. And unfortunately, one of the little puppies had wandered over to his wheel, and he backs over the puppy. So I hear him get up, I hear him take off, or I hear him crank up his fucking car, and it's loud as fuck, and I wake up and I'm looking over and I hear him, basically cuss all of a sudden. And then I look over just in time to see the little puppy having a seizure because it's been run over. Its spine's been broken or something. And right around that time, he goes over to the side of the garage door's open, he kicks the puppy outside, and then chops its head off with an axe. And then he jumps inside of his goddamn Camaro, leaves the beheaded puppy's corpse there, and then takes the fuck off. And I've really tried to break this down in my head as to exactly, you know, what exactly was fucking going on emotionally, which was just total obliteration at that point. Everything had led up to that moment in time, and just seeing this helpless little animal get run over by a fucking hot rodding piece of shit and then beheaded, that took no initiative to solve this situation or get involved or get these fucking dogs to a safe place, nothing. Really, 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 really drove me beyond the point. And this is where the story gets really graphic, even more so. The dog just, you know, the puppies just end up grabbing, you know, the mother ends up grabbing the body. They end up dragging the body back into the fucking garage. It's a fucking nightmare. It's something that you would never, ever, ever, ever imagine or want to be exposed. And I wake up to this, mind you. And it was just so destructive to my mental state, to my mind, to my heart. And being in this situation, being around this asshole, knowing that I could not do anything to him physically or whatever. I mean, that was kind of the point, is he knew that we couldn't fight back, and if we did fight back, we would be thrown out on the streets. This is the kind of sadistic, twisted fucking mind that I was dealing with. He began to violate later in other ways, and he stepped over lines with me later on. But this was kind of the crux. So with that, I got up. I took the what was remaining of the puppy's corpse. I buried it the best I could. You know, wrapped it up in something that would keep the dogs from smelling it. And then I immediately worked on getting in touch with animal control to find the dogs a place to live. The puppies. And we ended up getting the puppies a place to live. Brownie ended up wandering off somewhere. I didn't really care, you know, but we just had to get them out of there, period, because they were all going to get killed. He would have done it probably in some very creative, shitty ways, because he's just a fucking cocksucker. And I got no quarrel with that, saying that. And if he somehow sees this video, I hope he does. I hope he finds me at some point. And that's it. And, you know, I hope we do cross paths one day, and I can, you know, finally just, you know, spit in his fucking face and get it on. You know, just fucking have a knockdown, throw out, whatever the fuck is going to happen between us. Because that was just the moment that was so destructive to me. And that was one of beginning of many, 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 many more moments that would push me beyond human levels of just mental endurance over the years. And, you know, I say all that to say now, you know, and I'm sorry, you know, but you guys have to understand that, you know, going through that and then trying to fight my way back and getting into an apartment and then keeping my job and then going through all that and then going up to the point in my apartment where I just felt suicidal. I think it's understandable to where the subsequent damages over the years have been done. And, you know, since my mom's death and passing and just having to work through that and then going into situations like this, I just got too good and too comfortable at, you know, compartmentalizing, pushing that shit in, deal with it later, and then eventually one day, far off in the future, over so many things happening, it caused me to just mentally have a breakdown and attempt suicide. And that's where I just spiraled out of control from that point forward. And in moments where, you know, there was people I was counting on, relying on to be anything but, cruel or just to push me into some kind of shitty position or to hold me down or to try to fuck with me. It just seemed that the people were consistently failing me in my life that I grew up with and I thought were brothers and I thought had my back in any situation and everything like that. But that situation in and of itself, the violence to that animal, and something I'd bonded with. I'd held the puppies and I looked at them, and like I said, there's a dark period in my life, so I'm seeing these, this, and it's love, it's caring, it's something that I can impart some kind of positivity in to rebuild or to whatever. It was kind of a beautiful moment in a horrible world, and then that was destroyed by this thing that calls itself human, but it's not. It's not. He's not human. He's not a human being. He's a sociopath and a sick person. And there was no need for it once again. And, and I just want to say to whoever may be watching this, I know lately I've self-identified as homeless across other platforms. And that gives people a very easy in to try to shit on me and to fuck with me and stuff like that. Fortunately, I've been through it on and off for years, so I know that people in this country now love to find helpless targets, just like with that puppy. They love to find helpless targets to prove how big they are, how better they are, or something like that, which is bullshit. And those kind of people are very sick, very bad individuals, because you can always tell what a man is or whatever, or a human being is, by the way they treat somebody who is helpless. And you really have to pay attention to that. And you really have to look at that. And that is not only a red flag, but that is a glaring showing of their mentality and their fucking moral compass and everything like that. I have to make this video and I have to talk about it because I'm going to start doing this with my mental traumas. I'm going to label this series trauma dumping or whatever, because I just want to put it out there. And as a record, because in homelessness, with the heat and the weather and stuff like that, like today, for example, the storm rolls through, lightning strikes literally the building that I'm in right above me. You never know when the next day might be your last. You never know when the next night might be your last. You never know what's going to happen to you. Somebody might get a kick out of killing a homeless person one day and decide to kill me. You never really know. And I say all that to say, I know you may look at my life right now, may look at the title or the definition I wear, because I'm not going to hide what I am, and I'm not going to hide it from the world. I'm going to speak my truth for as long as I can speak my truth until I die, because I hope one day it's going to be a lesson for us to be better people, to be better fucking people, to treat homeless people better, to work to change the fucking problems of this country instead of allowing them to, go into propriety of getting worse and worse and worse by the fucking day. And to understand that, like me, there's other homeless people who their stories are just as valid. Their stories didn't, they weren't born monsters, or they weren't born crazy. They were, made this way. A lot of their stories are years of subsequent abuse, sexual or physical or otherwise, from people who predated on homeless people, or predated on the weak, or predated on sick people, or mentally unstable people, or whatever. You take that as you will. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. If you would like to help me out in any way, I'm going to leave, my Cash App, Venmo, PayPal in the description. And that's it. And please be better to each other. Please be kind. Please just, do better.